Okay, so hello to any and everyone that may be viewing this. My name is Rodney Knox. I am a brand marketing executive, also a social entrepreneur, and finally an educator. So I try to kind of put it in those three big buckets. I spent my life involved in communications and brand marketing. Spent 24 years doing those jobs in the NFL, 10 years at Nike. And I also spent 3 years at Masterclass, again, essentially in roles that related to brand marketing and the kind of a larger umbrella, and then a lot related to communications and social media, more specifically. But to really try to sum it up, I'd say, yeah, brand marketing is what I've spent the majority of my career doing, in all those 8 different functions that make up the brand marketing wheel. So that's my core work. When you ask about God, the moments, I've had so many, to be quite honest with you. I've been extremely blessed in my career. I talked about those 24 years in the NFL. 20 of them were with the 49ers. During the course of those 20 years, we won 4 championships. So you talk about getting a high as a someone involved in sport and athletics. Nothing better than winning championships. So you win 4 of them. You had some really special moments. And the athletes that were a part of that team, 7 of them are in the Hall of Fame, and one of the coaches is in the Hall of Fame too. So that was, I would say, that entire run of 20 years was quite the high. Now leaving there and going to Nike afterwards, it's we can get into that in more detail, but I don't want to kind of downplay the impact that the Nike years had on my life and my career. But in terms of just like in the moment and celebrating, winning championships is great. The parade that follows is even better. Those parades is crazy. Downtown San Francisco for blocks and blocks. Everybody kind of hanging out of their offices, 20 stories high, throwing down confetti, and just the feel and the love. That's the high. That really is. It makes it great.
Thanks for that. I'm sure that's a very high bar there. I wonder if we're gonna get other participants, John, that have a higher high than what Rodney has experienced. I feel maybe I'm remembering wrong. Maybe it's another Rodney. Maybe it's someone else. But I've interviewed you before for a Spear assignment in the past, and you mentioned something about Michael Jordan, and you had a relationship with Michael Jordan. Is that correct?
Well, I worked at Nike, and yes, by the time I was there, I started there in 2003. Michael Jordan wasn't on campus as a regular, but the folks that were part of the Jordan brand, I worked with them quite a bit. And yes, I've met Michael more than once and had a chance to interact with. To be quite honest with you, his children run the Jordan brand, or they're in large positions in the brand, and I've interacted with them more than I've actually interacted with Michael.
Well, still, you're a name that has been around a long time, and again, a lot of experience underneath your belt. Yes. And especially in the world of communications, and these aren't brands that get no recognition either, right? So thank you for what you're doing, and part of this project, Rodney, is again, we're talking to racial and ethnic minorities in the sports media / communication field. And just getting their experiences and really trying to tackle the problem of representation, and understand why that is, and based off of your experiences, and every story is different, right? So but before we get there, can we ask you about motivation? What inspired you to get into this field?
Yeah, interestingly, like a lot of young men growing up, I wanted to be a pro athlete. I had some success in athletics through my high school years, and I thought there was an opportunity there. But wisely, one of my English teachers, I think my junior year of high school, said, you also are actually, you're a decent writer. If you would really apply yourself, you could probably be pretty good at this. And it never really dawned on me until then. And so I started concentrating more on just in trying to build my talent as a writer. And once I finished high school and didn't get a scholarship to go to school, to go to a college anywhere, I realized, well, I'm not going to be a pro athlete. And I started really focusing more on writing and communications, and studied that as a college freshman all the way through, and kind of took journalism and communications as a pathway for me. So it was a combination of having some talent, but also someone identifying that talent and giving me the right nudge in the right direction.
Got it. Rodney, can you describe just your experience as a whole, working as a racial / ethnic minority in the field, in your field of sport communication?
Yeah, I'd love to. If you don't mind, I'm going to actually use some dates because I am definitely an old head, right? I graduated from college in 1980, so that'll give you an idea and perspective on the amount of years that I've been in. And so, thinking about that and where we are in 2023, that's 43 years. So I've seen a lot of change in the course of those 43 years. When I came in and took my job with the Chargers, the San Diego Chargers at the time, months out of college, I was one of three total people of color that had any position in public relations in the NFL. Yeah, 32 teams, right? And each team probably had 2 or 3 PR positions, and I was one of 3 total. So that gives you an idea of how limited the numbers were in terms of people of color in the league, and that speaks a lot to the lack of hiring that was going on for people of color in the league. Certainly, I wasn't. There were only 3 of us that were qualified to have those jobs. There were only 3 of us that were actually hired to have those jobs. So I can say that over those years, over those 43 years to where we are today, I've seen a lot more hiring, a lot more opportunities for people of color, for women, and particularly the NFL, where I spent most of my years, but across the sports spectrum. So there has been progress, but certainly there needs to be more. I put it that way. I think that the numbers are better, but it shouldn't be about a numbers game. It should be about really giving the right opportunities to the qualified individuals to take them. So I've definitely got some perspective, and we can go into more detail, follow-up questions. But I would say that's sort of the long view.
Great, appreciate that. Let's kind of keep it there though, in terms of the hiring practices and sure. How do you think sports media organizations can better promote diversity and inclusion in their hiring practices?
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was it.
Yeah,
that was the question.
One of the most things is identifying quality candidates, right? A lot of sports organizations don't do that. And that was one of the things that I was insistent upon when I was in my jobs in the NFL, particularly, was the fact that I knew there were others behind me that I had gone to college with that were equally qualified. So it's making sure that organizations are either very proactive in trying to identify and search for quality candidates, or having people from within notify the organization and make the opportunities available. I got my opportunity, as an example, I got my opportunity in San Diego with the Chargers because there was a gentleman there by the name of Paul Tank Younger, former NFL great, Grambling College, great running back, and played for the Rams for many years. Hank went out of his way to tell the folks within the Charger organization that he wanted to make sure that he had some representation of people in color in doing some of those jobs in the front office. Therefore, one of my college colleagues at San Diego State, who was with the Chargers at the time, said, okay, I've got a candidate for you, me. So it was, again, that active involvement internally. So sometimes you have to have people like that. And sometimes the orgs themselves need to just be more proactive and definitely identifying candidates.
And then furthering that, right? I mean, it's one thing to hire and identify them, right? And it's another thing to keep them there, to, give them a career in that field, right? Obviously, as you have. How does that happen? How does it go from, you're searching and then you find one, and then now it's okay, it's beyond the training, it's let's look long term.
Yeah, I think it's a two-way street, or they're both parties have to be involved. So the org again has to think long term, long game about whomever they're hiring and how they can help manipulate and move them up the ladder, creating opportunities for them within the organization. And then it's incumbent upon the individual to continue to prepare themselves and train and get as doggone good as you can get in your chosen profession and your skill level, and also look for ways that you can be that much more valuable to your organization by going above and beyond just the job description. So creating your space, creating the demand, just showing folk that I've got not only these skills, but I have these skills that could be transferable or that could be valuable to the organization.
And you add value, and you then slowly become say promoted, or you start getting these leadership role opportunities. How valuable, no pun intended, but how valuable are those leadership roles to be held by these by people of color, by women? How valuable is that?
Yeah, so they're valuable, and I always say that you don't want a position that doesn't actually have some real power, some actual power. So once you're moving up the ladder, you want to make sure that you're in positions that you can help those that are coming behind you, and that you have a kind of a sensitivity and an awareness to that there are others that are going to come behind you, that you need to create those opportunities for them. So it's one thing to have the job; it's another thing to have a job that can actually have some real impact upon your organization, and then exercise that impact. Sometimes you have to fight your way into getting that impact, and go against what may be the grain, and that can be risky, particularly early in your career. But there is also some merit in that if the people that are above you have respect for not only the courage it takes to do that, but also respect for you and your character as an individual and that value that you bring to the org. They're more than likely going to go, okay, if this person's like that, people that he or she are going to bring in will probably be reflective of that same type of behavior.
Would you say in these impactful positions, especially for people of color, would you say there's a certain level of pressure to perform when you're in those positions, because you're almost sort of representing a larger group underneath?
Yes. Short answer is absolutely. And it. There's no doubt. It because of just what you said, because the eyes are on you, and you also know that you can be the model for others to follow, either positively or negatively. So yeah, there is that pressure, and it kind of comes with the territory. But as a person of color, that pressure is there every day of your life, and it's a matter of rising to the moment and rising to the occasion. And again, I keep saying this, so I apologize for repeating, but bringing others with you. Others, you identify others that also are more than competent, more than capable, and more than willing to take these steps that you need to take. And again, including that skill level, the courage that you're going to need to take, the moxie that you're going to need to have to continue to push the boundaries.
I have a general one here for you, Rodney. Do you believe increasing diversity in newsrooms, control rooms, front offices, assignment desks, etc., can lead to better coverage and more accurate representation of athletes from different backgrounds?
Oh yeah, I absolutely believe so, because let's face it, we're products of our environment to a certain degree, and there's some environments that there are learnings that come out of those environments, and you don't get the same learnings out of every environment. And if you bring those learnings into your job, it helps many times frame perspective on situations. So this is not necessarily a great example, but it's the first one that comes to mind. A journalist, a writer early in my career explained to me how he could frame a story where one of our running backs took a big hit by a defender that forced the ball to come out, or the running back was haphazard in his handling of the ball and he fumbled. again, it's the perspective you bring. You're either blaming the running back or you're saying that was a great hit by the defender, right? Those same perspectives you can bring based upon your own environments and your own cultures. And sometimes the perspective is really reflected in the coverage. So therefore, you got to have multiple perspectives looking at the same situation. And you bring those perspectives, hopefully, into what makes for balanced coverage. For so long, there wasn't that balanced coverage because so many of those perspectives weren't even in the newsroom, right? So things that could be seen a certain way based upon environment, based upon experience, based upon exposures, those perspectives were never offered. Those point of views were never delivered. So yes, that's what diversity will do for you. It will provide those perspectives and point of views that are not necessarily right or wrong, but it is, again, so much of it is from the perceiver.
Thank you for that. Have you, staying on that, I mean, biases, have you ever had to confront your own biases or your own assumptions in, your daily workflow, based on, athlete, or sorry, not athletes, but, just people, or maybe athletes, yeah, from say different backgrounds?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think we all have them. It's like people when they say they're colorblind. I don't see how you can be colorblind. You have those that you see color, right? And you see people, and sometimes, yeah, we create biases, or we have built-in mindsets about how they could be. That's one of the beauties to me, though, of sport and athletic, is that there's very little that's hidden, particularly, kind of in the locker room, the mindset of being in a locker room. Everything is pretty wide open, and all those, most times, the barriers that sometimes exist in society that stop us from having those open conversations, those barriers are down when you are, again, one group of men or women trying to achieve this goal. Oftentimes that means you have to just understand and tolerate others a lot quicker. And that will help you kind of challenge your biases and many times defeat those biases.
Thank you. Rodney, I know you're very well networked. How important is it to be well networked in the sports media industry in particular?
Oh yeah. Look, again, people always talk about, it's not what you know, it's who you know. To me, it's the combo. It's who you know, because again, that provides the opportunities, that provides the pathways to get to positions, but it's also what you can do when you get the job. So if you have the right network, but you don't have the right skill set, that actually is a detriment, because as we talked about earlier, you can get in a job, and if you don't perform well, that could then hurt the next person that's coming up. So yeah, networking is extremely important, particularly when it's done not so overtly, when it's more organic and natural. You don't want to go out and be like a politician and glad handing everybody and talking yourself up too much, or trying to gain too many business cards in a short amount of time. You want to make it authentic, and you want it organic. But yes, and then it's the other thing is having a network and knowing when to use the folk in your network. You want to save your bullets to the right time, and the right approach, and the right opportunity. Because if you use them too soon, or if you use up that contact, oftentimes you don't get a chance to come back and use it again.
In your opinion, what role does the sports media industry play in promoting diversity, inclusion, and social justice in sport and society as a whole?
Yeah, I think the sport media has gotten better. The other thing I'd say is that post George Floyd, everyone developed all of a sudden, this social conscience, particularly as it related to impact and serving underserved and overlooked communities. So I do think that there has been an emphasis on that. My hope is that it's not just a fashionable thing, that it was a thing to do for a couple of years, and now we're going to drift away from that, but it becomes a permanent way of life, and a permanent way to cover events. There are, as we all know, the leagues, the professional leagues, have a lot of programming out there that's about serving communities and serving the underserved. None of that probably gets the type of coverage that it should get in relation to the on the field performance piece. And I think that's where we all could do better, is really creating content and drawing attention to those programs. I talk about this a lot. I might even said it in my introduction. It's very important to be social entrepreneurs, really invest long-term in the growth and development through programs and policies and practices, basically, of that we're going to really try to be in this community. So not anything that's short-term, something that's long-term, something that's sustainable. Then that becomes even more of a story and a narrative that can be covered. So I think it's a 1-2 punch. You got to have that. You got to have the absolute commitment through social entrepreneurship that then will lead to better storytelling.
Kind of looking into taking it from more of an educator perspective.
Sure.
So oftentimes in our background research for this project, we discovered that in sports media, a lot of the times for racial and ethnic minorities, initially in their upbringing, much like you, they wanted to be professional athletes.
Yep.
And then they saw sports media as a way for them to still be around the sport. Is there anything from an educational standpoint that can be done to maybe, I guess, make sports media as a more viable output rather than, a second option?
Yeah, that's a great, all these questions are good. And that question is, I'm going to answer it, but I'm also going to attach it to another thought. So I'll just let you know that in advance. I do think that if people like yourselves, myself, if we are visible earlier in the lives of children when they're in elementary school, and so they truly see this as a pathway, a career, that you don't have to be the athlete. And not only that it's a career, but it's a meaningful career. And it has its own inherent joys that come out of it and gains that could come out of it. So that one of the things I try to do is every time and anytime I can get a chance to get in front of younger children and middle school children, elementary school children, and they see me and they hear my story, they'll know, oh, okay, that's a pathway for me. I can do that. I don't have to be an athlete to be involved in sport. So I think it's incumbent upon us to do that. Those of us that are now in the field and in the profession. In terms of the curriculums themselves, yeah, I think instead of, when I was growing up, most of the people of color that I saw that were involved in athletics were participants. They were on the field, or they were on the pitch, or they were on the court. There were no one that I saw that were executives. No one that I can remember growing up. So I think that needs to change too. You need to have those kind of visuals in front of you as you're growing up, and you see that and you relate to that. I think we all can relate to being a young kid in school, and there's something that you saw in a book or in a library that kind of, boom, that it goes off in your head that, oh, that's cool. That's something I would want to do. So I think that needs to happen too, in terms of, again, putting those images in front of children at a younger age so that they see it's a viable profession. Now, that said, I know we're talking about sports communications and things of that nature, but here's one of the dangers that I've seen, and we don't want to overdo it and just make it about the communications function, because the reality of it is, if people of color are really going to get to the C level and president's level of running teams and running organizations, and that's what we should strive to do, not only run them, but own them, the ownership piece. You have to be involved in revenue producing activities. So, and communications by nature is normally like a non-revenue producer. That's the reason why I made the bridge over to marketing, which is more revenue producing. And generally, if you are in a revenue producing track, you have a much more of a clear path to get to that C level, to get to the C-suite level and get to the president's level. So I would say, yes, we need all those things that I talked about earlier in terms of representation and the visuals, but we need to show people that are not just communications professionals in sport, but people that are club presidents, people that are directors of marketing, people that are director of suite sales, people that are CFOs, so that you can see the variety of jobs that are available within sport that are not necessarily on the participation side. That was a
Very,
long.
very,
That was a good answer.
very interesting. We'll quote part of that for sure. And it's funny because you mentioned the word curriculum, Rodney, and it's Autumn Blue. You know Autumn, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just talking to her yesterday,
Yeah.
and she
Yeah.
was talking to me about, how, like, she's like, well, I've taken the spear, more than one semester already, but she's like, I was unaware that there was a kin 164 class in the kinesiology department, which I know you had some sort of relationship with, correct, with words to action and
Yep.
yeah. And I just found it interesting because she was like, if I would have known before this,
Yeah.
if I would have known before about this, I would have, taken this class and probably, because she was, I guess, one of the only PR students in there. So it's definitely about education and exposing, the youth and even college students to the opportunity that's out there.
So right. So I would say this, and I kind of intentionally didn't say this in part of my introduction, but I obviously spent some years at San Jose State too, almost 3 years there, running or the associate director for the study of sports society and social change. And that's the reference that you made back to the Kent department, because we had some overlap with some of their faculty that were a part of our advisory board. So just want to, for the record, make sure that people are aware of that too. But that said, that is one of the areas, as you just talked about, identifying courses at the college level that can help prepare you. And I do think that, let's face it, that's one of the things that I want to do when I get back on campus, is to make sure that students are aware of those things. And they're aware of courses and they're aware of tracks and they're aware of opportunities that exist out there that will help prepare them so that when they're going through their college lives, they'll walk out of there with a well-rounded education and sense of how and where they want to go with their careers.
And kind of finishing off and the last few minutes that we have here and circling back to that exact point, take yourself back to your college days.
Yep.
What advice would you give a aspiring minority sports journalist, say you want to be a host, anything that has to do with sports media and communication? And then how does that advice differ, you think, from, say, a non-racial or ethnic minority?
Yeah. Okay. So I'd say this. First of all, I always say that I've been extremely blessed, and so and I have been in my career. So my journey has been unlike most. Again, just thinking about what I recited in terms of my experiences. So I've had a lot of good fortune. The things I did that were, I think, correct in the moment, and I would still advise people to do. We touched on it a little bit. It's really intentional networking, not just networking for the sake of meeting people, but kind of do your research on who you want to meet and why, and put yourself in that position to connect with those people. And part of that is not being bashful. You got to go ahead and sometimes put yourself in a situation that may be a little uncomfortable. But if you come in with confidence and with, again, a real kind of intentional determination, it becomes clear by the people that are kind of that you want to meet. And the other advice I'd give is, you never can tell who's going to be helpful in your next job. You don't know who's going to be. One of the biggest moves I ever made in my life was leaving the Chargers and joining the 49ers. The person that recommended me for that job was a Black journalist here in the Bay Area. He's a guy that I had worked with because the 49ers and Chargers would play preseason games. And so he would be in the press box, or I'd see him in like at Candlestick Park in the press box. I had interaction with this gentleman, but not to the level that I thought that I was making an impression on it. I was just doing my job, but it was such that apparently he thought highly of me, and he mentioned me to Bill Walsh, and he said, "Okay, this gentleman, we appreciate your and we value your opinion of people." So they interviewed me for the job. So you just don't know. So always treat everyone at a high level. Always do your job at a high level, and those things become apparent to folks around you that don't even know that you're being watched. You don't know they're watching you, but they are. So always try to carry yourself and do your work at the highest level possible, and when possible, whatever the level is, exceed it. And that bit that you do that's above the level, do it damn good. That really makes you stand out. When someone, oh wow, look, not only did you deliver this, you delivered that, and that is amazing. That piece that's even above what we had. So keep your standard as high as possible and try to exceed it as much as you can. And that's challenging, right? But it also brings out the best in you, because it just makes you want to continue to achieve and excel.
Certainly does. Certainly does.
How does that differ? The back part of your question is, how does that differ than someone that is maybe not of color? Is that, going in, that some of that I like to talk about going above, that's part of what you got to do. You've got to distinguish yourself beyond what someone that is not a person of color would have to do, because the reality of it is, it's going to be much more likely and natural that someone will get hired based upon friendships and things of that nature. So you just got to set an extremely high standard and deliver on that standard and stand out.